Well, good afternoon, folks, and thanks very much for coming to another one of our TESS seminars, our weekly seminars and tests, which we run during the semesters here at JCU. As I'm sure you know, TESS stands for the Center for Tropical, Environmental, and Sustainability Science, and it's our main sort of research hub here at JCU for work, particularly in terrestrial environments, not the ocean, not the marine environments, but on land. That's really our ambit. Big thanks to Annabelle Belson for lots of work in lots of different areas, particularly getting the seminar program organized. We've certainly worked together on this, but it's not a small job actually finding speakers. I think this semester we have about 2/3 of our speakers actually flying in, something like that. Yeah, okay, so that's good. I mean, to try to, we're paying for that. We're getting them to come in and talk to us in person, which we love. But of course, in other cases, like now, it's really great to have speakers internationally as well. So it certainly has opened things up. So our speaker today, excuse me, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I need to say about TESS. This is our first semester talk of the semester. Oh, we actually have, by the way, for the first time since I've been involved in TESS now, going on my 15th year, for the first time ever, we actually have more women speakers than we do have male speakers in our seminar program. And that's the way we've been trying to kind of move for a while. So anyway, I'm happy with that. Our speaker today is Teddi Lynn Chichester. Teddi grew up in Southern California, and then she spent a lot of time, as she describes it, chasing banana slugs up in Northern California, which the banana slug, by the way, is an exotic species up there. It's this massive slug, and enjoying her time spending with her father, who was a parks ranger, I believe, up in Northern California in the summers. Teddi was trained at University of California, Santa Barbara, and at UCLA, both of which would rank in the top probably 5 public universities in the world. So in fact, UCLA right now is right up there, close to the very top. Teddi is trained in literature and writing, and she's a fantastic writer. She's just written a book called on the topic of wildlife crossings. It's Crossings of Hope, that type of thing. And she certainly knows the literature. We got into contact with her, being interested in various things about that. And it's a real pleasure to introduce Teddi to talk to us, Teddi Chichester, to talk to us today. Thanks, Teddi.
Thank you so much, Bill, for inviting me to participate in your wonderful TESS seminars. And I greet everybody from Los Angeles. It's about 11 p.m. here, so I'm going to try to not have too much caffeine, but I will stay awake. A big thanks to Annabelle Belson. She patiently answered my countless questions about logistics and whether a non-scientist belongs in the TESS world. So I feel very welcome by the TESS world today. Thank you. I want to pay my respects to the Gabrielino Tongva people, past and present, from whose ancestral lands I address you. At the heart of what we'll be talking about today is the word connectivity. For most of us, this term probably conjures visions of our various gadgets, or perhaps anxiety about Wi-Fi access. And that's definitely an issue for me as I greet you across many time zones. But for wildlife, connectivity is what allows them to move safely through the world as they search for food, water, mates, and shelter, and a break from all the Homo sapiens who are taking over their spaces. Protecting and often creating clear pathways for wild creatures is the work of scientists, environmental activists, engineers, and landscape architects around the world. And experts in the fairly new field of road ecology bring together various disciplines as they study and strive to mitigate the harmful effects of roadways on nature, plants, animals, waterways, soil, and climate. Yet connectivity unrelated to iPhones and laptops also enfolds all of us human animals in its embrace when we make even the most tentative steps towards recognizing ourselves as part of the natural world. I see the crucial work of conservation as flowing out of the deep connections made, often as very young children, with a particular tree or animal, or perhaps a translucently clear lake that beckons us from our distant past. For the Irish poet William Butler Yeats, a tiny island in such a lake haunts his dreams and fuels his determination to Arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the veils of the morning to where the cricket sings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day, I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavement's gray, I hear it in the deep heart's core. For the American poet Mary Oliver, memory also colors her relationship with the natural world. In her short lyric, Sleeping in the Forest, however, it is nature's own memory of her prodigal daughter returning after a long absence that invokes and strengthens the connection. I thought the earth remembered me. She took me back so tenderly, arranging her dark skirts, her pockets full of lichens and seeds. Although neither poem mentions childhood explicitly, they both suggest that nature enters the deep heart's core when we're young, open to her magic, eager for the adventure or solace or simple companionship that nature offers. And in Oliver's poem, the earth has her own identity, her own subjectivity. This forest is fully alive, aware, and wonderfully generous. William Wordsworth, the preeminent poet of nature, as Percy Shelley calls him, lifts us to loftier heights as he contemplates how, quote, the beauteous forms of rural England infused his childhood and shaped his very identity. In his 1798 masterpiece, Tintern Abbey, Wordsworth declares himself pleased to recognize in nature the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart, and soul of all my moral being. Now, I doubt that everyone working today in the fields of climate science, mycology, tropical ecology, or wildlife biology can trace their passion for science back to a precise moment in childhood when their love for nature first bloomed. Yet curiosity, enthusiasm, imagination, and what we might call interspecies empathy fuel scientific investigation and the passion to protect the planet. And these certainly have deep roots in our earliest experiences. The legendary ecologist E.O. Wilson spoke of what he called biophilia, the kind of primal bond we have with other species, including plants. We can rediscover and even strengthen these qualities, perhaps empathy most of all, when we turn to powerful works of literature or any of the creative arts. As the daughter of a botanist and California State Parks naturalist, I was lucky to spend long childhood hours and whole summers camping, hiking, and swimming in clean lakes and rivers. But the books that I read as a kid about wild animals and places and the young, adventurous protagonists who encountered them instilled my own love of nature just as powerfully as my direct experiences in the forests and fields. Sadly, many children have little access to the natural world. Thus, the words on a page, or more likely, images on a screen, may be their only avenue into the wild. When I decided to take a break from academic research, focus on literary criticism, and write an environmentally themed book for young children, for young readers, I learned about a new series created by the New York-based publisher Holiday House, Books for a Better Earth. With a middle school audience in mind, the series so far explores kelp forests, plastic waste, desert habitats, and even paleoclimatology for middle schoolers, which is pretty great. My own volume focuses on, you guessed it, wildlife connectivity, on the ways we're helping creatures navigate our insanely built up world, including, quote, the infrastructure tsunami, in the words of your own Dr. Lawrence, that's inundating the planet and tragically devouring and splintering natural habitats. Fortunately, as I learned while researching my book, Wildlife Crossings of Hope, animal infrastructure like bridges arching over or tunnels burrowing under roads is helping mammals, reptiles, amphibians, fish, birds, and even insects find safe passage through a world that has been, quote, hacked into pieces, as environmental writer David Quammen puts it. But before we look at examples of wildlife crossing structures, we need to consider why what's called habitat fragmentation is so dangerous and even deadly, not just for individual creatures, but for whole populations and even species. When we clear land to create cities, farms, airports, Amazon warehouses, ranches, and roads, animals' travel routes are blocked. These creatures become trapped on scattered, shrinking islands of land where food and water become scarce and inbreeding muddies and weakens gene pools. Add to that the overcrowding exacerbated as animals are pushed into the exposed, hot, and often desiccated edges, and then pushed back from them into the teeming interior that becomes again overcrowded. Both biodiversity and genetic diversity take huge hits, and quote, ghost populations of mostly older animals may be all that's left. All of these factors can lead to local extinction, possible precursor to regional, and worst of all, global extinction of a species. TESS's own Dr. Lawrence has been at the center of what's been called the world's largest and longest running experimental study of habitat fragmentation. Launched in 1979 by the renowned conservation biologist Dr. Thomas Lovejoy, the Biological Dynamics of Forest Fragment Project, BDFFP, and that's how I'll refer to it from now on because the other is a mouthful. It's still unfolding in northern Brazil. 11 patches or reserves of rainforests surrounded by seas of decimated land quickly revealed the unrelenting process of what's called ecosystem decay, as first specialists and then even some generalist species disappeared. To be clear, the BDFFP scientists weren't the ones doing the slashing and burning, but instead they were shaping and studying the patches left after farmers and ranchers and other developers, quote unquote, obliterated the forest. Shade-loving butterflies, black spider monkeys, and insectivorous birds all vanished pretty quickly, as did one particular creature who really captured my fancy. One of the most endangered mammals of the neotropics, the white-lipped peccary needs lots of space as it thunders through the forest in huge, gregarious squadrons. WLPs, and I'm sorry, I didn't show you here's the other, oh my goodness, sorry about that. Here's another BDFP patch, and then here's the peccary. So I'm going to call them WLPs. WLPs are indicator species whose presence or absence signals the health or disease of the ecosystem itself. These quote unquote pigs of the jungle, they're not even pigs, but that's what people sometimes call them, also serve the forest as invaluable gardeners, prodigiously dispersing seeds. Moreover, WLPs are champion ecosystem engineers who create with their vigorous mud rolling, roomy, rain-filled wallows where, for example, exquisite Phylomedusa tree frogs can breed. And I just want to show you, I just was so captivated by these creatures. I just want to show you the white-lipped peccaries for a minute in their wallow. Here's post-wallow peccaries. And this is the artist's rendering this is an interior illustration by Jamie Green, who did the cover and all the illustrations for my book. So these are the peccaries in their wallow, and then these amazing tree frogs who depend on this boisterous construction crew to build their tadpole nurseries. They need these wallows to lay their eggs. For me, the white-lipped peccary became the BDFPs FFP's flagship species, the animal who sparked my curiosity, concern, and anger about the scorched earth policies annihilating the tropical rainforest. Less obviously than stark images of green patches awash in drab brown wasteland, wild places everywhere on the planet are being similarly carved up, as in the BDFFP. I now see the white-lipped peccary as the bristly, homely face of a fragmented planet. These rainforest rowdies allowed me, paraphrasing the poet Shelley, to imagine that which I know, to transform the scientific knowledge imparted by statistics and scholarly papers into vivid, intimate images that in turn sparked or reignited that empathy with the more than human world that usually begins in childhood. When it comes to one of the main drivers, excuse the pun, of habitat fragmentation, it's the grim evidence of animal carcasses. Now, these are not carcasses, sorry, this is just your last glimpse of white-lipped peccaries. I'm a little obsessed with them, so I've got a lot of pictures of them. But again, one of the main drivers of fragmentation is roads and the roadkill, unfortunately, that we see. Now I'm just going to show you some pictures of non-roadkill animals in roads. So these photos are either really hopeful, the animals are safe, or delusional, they're just safe for the moment, or they're photoshopped, I'm not sure. But I guess it's better than showing you roadkill. So you get to see these instead. Over 65 million kilometers of road girdle the planet, and that's just the legal mapped ones, while more than 1 million vertebrates sacrifice their lives on the road annually in the US alone. Insect losses tally in the trillions. In his classic essay, Apologia, American nature writer Barry Lopez grieves the countless victims of roadkill he encounters in Oregon, Idaho, Iowa, and Wyoming. His road trip becomes both a via dolorosa, which means sorrowful path, and an opportunity to honor the dead. And I'm quoting him, "Who are these animals? Their light's gone out. What journeys have fallen apart here?" he wonders as he carries each porcupine or rabbit or sage sparrow carcass away from the tarmac into a cover of grass or brush out of decency. Those who are designing, building, and monitoring the wildlife bridges that are now crisscrossing the planet are trying to ensure that such journeys do not fall apart, that animals make their way across, under, and even high above the roadways that pierce their worlds. The conservationists who fight for, and the engineers and landscape architects who create such structures do not see wildlife crossings as a panacea. But until the frenzy of road building stops, speed limits drop, and car culture loses its shine, and that's probably not going to happen, they can point to heartening evidence that overpasses, culverts, and canopy bridges are indeed saving lives, both animal and human. For example, the famous array of wildlife crossings in Canada's Banff National Park has cut wildlife vehicle collisions by 80%. And pangolins in Singapore, dormice in Britain, elephants in Kenya, and pine martens in the Netherlands now cross roads, including freeways, much more safely, thanks to the animal infrastructure now in place. I'd like to take you all on a little tour of wildlife crossings that captured my imagination and convinced me that these conduits are indeed connecting animals with needed habitat and with each other. Okay, so this one is not what's called a dedicated structure, specially built for wildlife. It's just a small drain pipe, but it can allow neighborhood squirrels, lizards, rabbits, and tiger beetles to travel safely beneath the road. This too is another accidental wildlife crossing. It's part of the trail system in Prairie Creek Redwoods State Park, where my dad was a naturalist. And I saw this first when I was really little, and it kind of terrified me. It was just this dark tunnel, but now I see it and I'm in love with it. There are lots of these quote unquote accidental wildlife crossings. This stream sheltering culvert fascinated me, and as I said, kind of scared me when I was a kid, peering into and then tiptoeing into its dark recesses. Chipmunks, raccoons, frogs, and salamanders travel across the damp ledge while coho salmon swim through the creek. The park's iconic Roosevelt elk are too big for this culvert, so they just amble across the roadway pretty safely. Everybody stops and kind of, gawks at them. Okay, but here's our next one. And this is another illustration by Jamie Green from the book. Spotted salamanders in Amherst, Massachusetts once succumbed to mass squashings during their big night when the first spring rain drew them from upland habitat to the vernal pools where they would spawn. But in 1987, a pair of amphibian road crossings welcomed its first shiny black migrators. Narrow and just 28 feet long, these two repurposed airport runway drains are flanked by drift fences or funnel fences that steer the salamanders towards the tunnels. So that's a pretty innovative use of airport drains. So these the creatures are then guided towards the tunnels. The spotted salamander saga offers a particularly inspiring example of grassroots conservation in service of a beloved wild resident. Amherst Hitchcock Center for the Environment partnered with the University of Massachusetts and the Audubon Society to secure funding. And local residents, including school children, help repair the fences and clean and monitor the tunnels all year round. Okay, this forested bridge, and a forested bridge is one that's got vegetation growing on it, as you can see. This takes us back to Brazil, this time to the Atlantic coast, where a 4-lane highway further imperils an already endangered primate. The fluorescently bright, tiny golden lion tamarin needs continuous forest canopy as it travels. And this overcrossing near Rio promises to connect the GLTs, again, the golden lion tamarins, of a newly created eco park with those dwelling in the Poço dos Antos Biological Reserve. And you can see there's actually a picture of a golden lion tamarin on this truck going under the golden lion tamarin bridge, which is kind of great. Okay, so there's lots of kind of great pictures of these wonderful creatures. So presently, these two populations are isolated and vulnerable to what's called inbreeding depression, so they really need to be reconnected. Dr. James Dietz of Save the Golden Lion Tamarin, which is the American branch of Brazil's AMLD, told me that the tops of the trees on the bridge, all native lowland Atlantic forest species, are not yet interwoven enough for the GLTs to traverse, but other terrestrial species such as armadillos and crab-eating foxes are in fact using the overpass. This example of green infrastructure, where green literally refers to vegetation, reminds us that creating these crossings takes time, not just compassion, ingenuity, and hard work and money. Moreover, AMLD and its partners are keeping in mind an essential rule of siting and designing wildlife crossings. The structures must directly connect to protected strips of land or corridors that in turn connect habitat reserves or protected areas. Those are the core dwelling places. Crossings, corridors, and cores. Those are the watchwords for wildlife connectivity, memorable and euphonious, especially if you like alliteration. The corridors flanking the GLT bridge include reforested pasture land to the north, and to the south, a strip of native tree seedlings on a privately owned cattle ranch. For now, the golden lion tamarins of the Brazilian southern coast must wait as their bridge's foliage unfolds towards maturity. As I researched my book, Wildlife Crossings of Hope, the wise words of E.O. Wilson kept echoing in my mind. Cherish each species in turn as a world unto itself, worthy of lifetimes of study. I certainly wish that I had lifetimes of study to spend with, for example, the rambunctious white-lipped peccary, as well as with this next creature who lives in the severely fragmented forests of India's Western Ghats. Like Brazil's golden lion tamarins, the endangered lion-tailed macaque is an arboreal species that needs intact forest for its sustenance, shelter, and travels. When the devastating duel of deforestation and road building severed this charismatic primate's canopy connection in the mountain ranges Valparaiso region, the Indian nonprofit Nature Conservation Foundation installed 7 canopy bridges made of rope or wood and rubber covered canvas, and you get a little bit of a distant look here. These suspended overpasses fastened to trees on each side of the road, stretching across like, well, monkey bars. Zoologist Dr. Joseph Erringeri calls LTMs kings of the top canopies, who had been reduced to housebreaking, garbage eating, and even begging when gaps in the forest forced them to ground. Worst of all, car strikes were taking their grim toll. Now, with the help of canopy bridges, these highly intelligent and communicative kings of the tropical forest are traveling in the high style to which they're accustomed, from treetop to treetop, avoiding the perils of the pavement below. Here in Southern California, wildlife connectivity is becoming quite the thing, as you'll see in these next 3 very different examples. Most of us probably don't envision insects when we think of wildlife that needs help getting across the road. But the tiny and critically endangered Kino checker spot butterfly definitely needed a lift above a busy thoroughfare, since its very low flight pattern landed it right in the middle of traffic and splattered across windshields. In an encouraging move that we're seeing in California and elsewhere, transportation officials in the city of Murrieta voted to include in their plans for a road extension an overcrossing that would protect both the checker spot butterfly and fellow coastal sage scrub species, such as coyotes, Virginia possums, and Southern Pacific rattlesnakes. Native plants such as deerweed and buckwheat, as well as plantain, the checker spot's primary host plant, attract the butterflies and ensure that their travel route remains well above the highway's danger zone. Not far from Murrieta's Butterfly Bridge, Los Angeles County's first wildlife underpass remains hidden beneath the ceaseless traffic of one of the region's busiest thoroughfares, a former oil field that's now a lush, protected habitat for bobcats, mule deer, skunks, roadrunners, and western spadefoot toads. The Puente Hills Preservation Authority provides animals both a sanctuary and a movement corridor that connects the reserve to other open spaces. The Harbor Boulevard Wildlife Underpass, completed in 2006 for $1.5 million, provides the vital link between 2 segments of the corridor severed by the road. The motion-activated camera at the tunnel's entrance snaps over 1,000 images a week. Even tiny butterflies can trigger it, and that's a lot of fun critter pics to peruse. Volunteers help ecologist Michelle Mariscal to comb through them. I was lucky to visit the underpass with Michelle one day, though usually human travelers through the site are strictly forbidden, as our presence and even our lingering scent discourage animals from entering. The cavernous structure, made of corrugated metal and encased in concrete, mutes the noise of traffic above, and its soft sandy bottom preserves the evidence of its wild commuters. A deer print here, a coyote print there. A bobcat print reminds us that Zeke the bobcat, a well-known and radio-collared member of the wildlife community here, helped raise support for this life-saving structure. Now, this is not Zeke because there's no radio collar, but it's the only bobcat picture I had from the structure. And again, we can look at that coyote eating a snake, which is amazing. Okay, so here's the bobcat. Another even more famous cat helped bring to fruition a truly epic wildlife connectivity project here in California, now underway about 96 kilometers northwest of the Harbor Underpass. In 2012, a young male mountain lion, also called a cougar or puma, made a perilous journey from his wilderness birthplace to an iconic regional park in the heart of the United States' second most populous city. To reach LA's Griffith Park, this big cat, eventually dubbed P22 for his position in a National Park Service study, crossed two of the world's busiest and widest freeways. There he lived alone for 10 years, a Hollywood celebrity, even photographed beneath the Hollywood sign, and also a symbol of the need to protect and connect the wild creatures who live among us, even in the urban jungle. As P22 remained largely hidden, feasting on deer and inspiring an annual P22 Day festival, t-shirt designs, and cute plushies, wildlife biologists, transportation experts, and environmental activists intensified their efforts to secure approval and funding for a massive, quote, mountain lion bridge. This crossing would span a notoriously dangerous section of freeway that bisected a well-studied wildlife corridor not far from LA, and thus help reconnect two threatened islanded populations of pumas, strengthening their gene pools and expanding their range. And so here's the corridor itself. This is Liberty Canyon. And here's the 101 freeway. And then in a minute, we're going to see the structure. There's the structure. It's under construction. It's not finished, but it's huge. So you can get kind of a taste of that where it fits in the corridor. Okay. There we go. Okay. So the stars aligned in more than one way when National Wildlife Federation Regional Executive Director Beth Pratt learned of P22's incredible trek and of the plans for an overcrossing in Liberty Canyon's Cougar Country. What would become the world's largest wildlife crossing now had the star power it needed. Beth's passionate eloquence and scientific expertise perfectly sparked with P22's feline courage and charisma, to which Beth, like many in LA and beyond, gladly succumbed. Though sadly, P22 passed on in 2022, his legacy will be the Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing in Agora Hills, due to open late 2025. Designed by Chicago landscape architect Robert Rock, this massive vegetated bridge will span 10 lanes of traffic and welcome with a wide variety of native plants being propagated right here in this nursery, not just mountain lions, but other wild roamers such as rabbits, lizards, deer, coyotes, butterflies, and snakes. This and other green bridges also help feathered travelers find safe passage, offering forage, shelter, and a lift above the whizzing traffic. Golden eagles, red-tailed hawks, California quail, and broad-billed hummingbirds are among the many bird species the bridge will invite for a flyover or perhaps a stopover. Without P22 and the major love, the major interspecies empathy he inspired, the Wallace-Annenberg crossing might still be in the planning stage, a distant dream of healed landscapes and freely roaming wildlife. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about Australia. Australia is writing its own impressive chapter in the ongoing story of wildlife connectivity. Like the Butterfly Bridge in Southern California, the Slaty Creek Wildlife Undercrossing in Macedon, Victoria, exists in part because transportation officials planning a highway upgrade actually listened to wildlife experts. Again, that sounds a little shocking, but they did. When the expansion of the Calder Highway into the Calder Freeway threatened to tear through a crucial wildlife corridor in the Black Forest, Vic Roads, or Victorian Government Roads Corporation, folded into its design plans and budget a $3 million open span undercrossing. This roomy, light-filled space keeps the corridor intact, and with plenty of native vegetation, it invites koalas and kangaroos, brush-tailed possums and brown tree frogs, as well as ring-tailed gliders who float from tree to tree like flying squirrels. While the Slatey Creek crossing hosts a wide array of Australian fauna, a pair of slender tunnels running beneath the Great Alpine Road in southeastern Australia serves just one target species, a minuscule marsupial once thought to be extinct until a few small populations were discovered in 1966. The huge-eyed, long-tailed, mouse-sized mountain pygmy possum dwells in the rocky highland terrain of Mount Higginbotham, where a major highway leading to a popular ski resort nearly pushed the critically endangered creature into actual oblivion. For most of the year, the males and females dwell apart, but when breeding season called the males upslope to seek out mates, the highway blocked their migration and their chance of siring a new generation of adorable mini possums. Now, two concrete culverts built in 1985 and crossable in about 15 seconds, and they're also dubbed by the press tunnels of love. These tunnels are helping ensure that the heroically resilient mountain pygmy possum survives and thrives in its rocky alpine home. Okay, as we wrap up the Australian leg of our tour, it looks like the jury's still out on the Queensland Cassowary crossing on Bruce Highway. Way over budget and perhaps badly designed, the structure may need its own version of P22 to redeem it. C22 perhaps, so Cassowary 22. Okay, so far we've mainly been talking about landscape connectivity, but aquatic connectivity is also something that wildlife biologists and other scientists are addressing with tangible and often dramatic results. While engineers, landscape architects, and road ecologists painstakingly plan and construct wildlife crossings, those working to liberate rivers and the creatures who inhabit them must patiently deconstruct the barriers blocking the flow of water and the migration of fish. All around the world, as wildlife bridges are going up and under, dams are coming down. In Japan, South Africa, and Europe, activists are protesting the ways that dams have turned rivers into machines of industry, churning out hydroelectric power, or into simple storage units or reservoirs for drinking water and irrigation that too often become silt-clogged toxic algae factories. The scum-clogged pond created when a small dam near my home obstructs a lovely rippling stream graphically attests to the ecological ills inflicted on much larger scales elsewhere by river impoundment. Here in the Golden State, the Southern California steelhead faces extinction because dams, climate change, and industrial waste block, warm, and pollute their swimways, the watery corridors that are also the lifeblood of the land itself. The conservation group California Trout is working to remove several barriers to steelhead connectivity, including the Matilaha Dam in Ventura County. The scissors and perforated line that you can see to the left, graffitied on its wall, attests to the theatrical flair embraced by many anti-dam protesters, though Cal Trout takes no credit or blame for this quote-unquote vandalism. And the dam is supposed to come out in the next year or so. Like salmon, steelhead trout are anadromous, meaning they begin life in freshwater streams or rivers, travel out to sea, then return to their natal waters to spawn and die. For these long-distance migrators, then, dams are especially devastating, short-circuiting their life cycles, in the words of Cal Trout's Dr. Sandra Jacobson. Salmon are at the heart of one of wildlife connectivity's wildlife connectivity's most exciting stories. Starting in 1918, a series of large dams have imprisoned the once salmon-rich Klamath River of southern Oregon and northern California, decimating the livelihood and culture of the native people who have fished and stewarded this fertile ecosystem since time immemorial. After decades of activists and legal wrangling by the Yurok, Karuk, and Klamath tribes, 4 of the 6 Klamath dams are coming down as we speak. When I visited the area this spring, I was thrilled to witness the river returning to life, finding its ancient channel with the help of some heavy machinery, as you see here. 8.5 tons of native seeds gathered, and this is the dry iron bed reservoir bed. These seeds gathered and planted by the Yurok Fisheries Department revegetation crew are starting to sprout along river and stream banks, as well as in the emptying reservoir beds. The soil exposed and sun-cracked after reservoir drawdowns, and that's the release of water prior to dam demolition, is already greening up with shoots of prairie bluegrass, smooth stem, blazing star, and California brome. Thanks to the largest dam removal and river restoration project in human history, Chinook and coho salmon, as well as steelhead trout, will soon surge through 644 kilometers of newly open waters, bringing healing and renewal to the river and the native communities of the Klamath Basin. The indigenous activists and their partners in the decades-long Undam the Klamath movement clearly had to think big and remain steadfast in the face of countless setbacks if they were to win the battle against the forces of industrialism. We'll now turn to another truly ambitious approach to protecting and connecting wild creatures and their habitats. Like those fighting to free the Klamath, scientists and advocates working in the field of large landscape conservation need to think big and play the long game. Whether called wild links, ecological connectivity zones, or mega links, extensive swaths of land are finding protection around the globe. In Mesoamerica, Costa Rica's Osa biological corridor is helping tapirs and jaguars find safe passage, while in Bhutan, 12 major biological corridors allow Malayan giant squirrels, red pandas, and iconic snow leopards and Bengal tigers to range more freely. But it's the North American continent that boasts the world's boldest corridor protection project. The Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative, launched in 1993, embraces as its strategic and literal background the Rocky Mountain Range, called by the Blackfeet people Mistakis, or the spine of the world. Stretching 3,200 kilometers, Y2Y is a truly transboundary vision and region, flowing through 2 countries, the US and Canada, 5 states, 2 provinces, and over 70 indigenous territories. Charismatic carnivores like grizzlies, wolves, and wolverines, fleet ungulates such as pronghorn and mountain goats, and less flashy ecosystem members, including long-toed salamanders and yellow-bellied marmots, are among the creatures finding sanctuary and connectivity within the Y2Y megacorridor. The region enfolds the world's first and second national parks, Yellowstone in Wyoming and Banff in Alberta, Canada, with its astonishingly beautiful and effective system of wildlife crossings. And here's one more illustration, or this is the back cover of the book, and this is Jamie Green's rendition of the Banff overpasses. What conservation biologists call climate-wise connectivity plays a crucial role in Y2Y's mission, as well as that of all efforts to include that wild creatures continue to live and move and have their being on this earth. As the planet heats up, many plant and animal species are moving northward toward the poles, in search of upslope, I'm sorry, they're moving upslope and toward the poles, in search of what scientists call climate refugia, such as those, or refuges, such as those found in the Rocky Mountains. But animals throughout the globe will need the kind of extensive intertwined corridors that Y2Y is providing as they search for new climate resilient habitats. Wildlife crossings are the most visible and most fun pieces in the jigsaw puzzle of wildlife connectivity. But even the grandest structures like the mountain lion overpass here in Southern California would be bridges to nowhere without the corridors that allow the cougars, spotted salamanders, butterflies, and golden lion tamarins we've met to find safe passage and maybe a new home. Whether it's strips of second growth rainforest reconnecting BDFFP patches, vast swaths of mountainous terrains welcoming Y2Y's suite of species, or stretches of open water offering cold, clear swimways for salmon, corridors are definitely the shining stars of today's conservation stories. I'd like to offer a final poetic, not just scientific vision of wild creatures finding secure, resource-rich, and even beautiful places to dwell. The heaven of animals. Here they are, the soft eyes open. If they have lived in a wood, it is a wood. If they have lived on plains, it is grass rolling under their feet forever. Their instincts wholly bloom and they rise, the soft eyes open. To match them, the landscape flowers, desperately outdoing what is required, the richest wood, the deepest field. Well, James Dickey's poem, published in 1962, can only imagine a wildlife haven as a literal wildlife heaven, a blessed afterlife. We in 2024 can do better. The creatures we care about so deeply deserve the richest wood, the deepest fields, the freest paths here and now. And we must do all we can to make our shared world a still wild enough place for them to thrive and to roam. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Teddi. That was a very interesting and articulate and unusually literate survey through the world of wildlife corridors. We've got about a little over 20 people online and people here in the audience. So any questions?
About poetry, please.
Yeah. Yes, I wanted to ask you about James Joyce, if that's okay. No, I'm just
of course. Yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay. Any questions? And any questions online? I had a question, Teddi.
Yeah.
You've obviously done this very extensive survey of what you might call, ecological connectivity and the things that people are doing to trying to help it. You're not going to find very many people in this room that are going to disagree with that premise that connectivity is just so crucial. Did you, in your surveys, did you come up with any conclusions, or did you try to do anything where you said, like, look, this type of corridor works really well, this one not so much? Were there design principles that were coming to light as you're doing this? And I'm just interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I got to sit in on a Zoom meeting for a planning session for the crossings themselves. So the experts, they were mammal experts and bat experts and large carnivore experts. They were all talking about the different types of structures that each suite of animals would prefer. So they do study to see, like, for example, black bears prefer to go under roads and grizzlies prefer overpasses. Those canopy bridges for primates and arboreal species. So it's really the animals that sort of tell the planners what to build. The other thing, and I think I mentioned this at the end, that obviously the structures have to be connected to corridors. So that planning has to do with tracking wildlife, and some of that has to do with roadkill. So where are these creatures getting hit? And so that, okay, that's where a structure is needed. But, a lot of the time, what works is this is the path they're taking anyway. So let's connect this bridge to a corridor that's already there. But yeah, I mean, it does seem that, most of the structures that I learned about are really effective. And a lot of the time the animals will start using them before they're finished. So that's, I guess I don't see a lot of sort of bad news. I mean, I'm sorry about, Annabelle sent me an article about the cassowary crossing, which seems a little controversial. So that's the one that doesn't seem designed that well, but maybe it'll be fine. I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's really good, Teddy. I just mentioned I had a PhD student who studied wildlife overpasses in Malaysia. And so it was very interesting study. And it did look like some species used the overpasses much more readily than others did.
Yeah.
One thing that the government actually tried to do is with the elephants, elephants just kind of tend to cross the road wherever they want. So they put up big electric fences along to try to stop them crossing in places. And then the elephants actually, they were just tearing the electric fences down. Elephants would come up and there would be like one elephant here in the fence and an elephant would knock his friend into the fence to knock it over. I mean, all kinds of things were happening. But it was it was an interesting picture. And corridors help some things, not others. Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, can I just say one more thing about like what really works is vegetation. I mean, that is what gets the animals there. So, these vegetated bridges with the native plants that they're going to eat, they're going to be able to shelter under, they're going to feel at home. That seems to be a huge key. So yeah, anyway, go ahead.
Any other questions? And anybody online, last chance? Okay, no questions online? Okay, great. Well, Teddi, I think one of the reasons why we don't have questions is your presentation was just crystal clear, absolutely spot on. And believe me, we don't always have that. We often have a little bit of confusion at the end of a talk. Really interesting talk. It's so interesting to hear happening there.
Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Of course.
Yeah, so dam removal, that started to get even more interesting to me as I was researching. And is that something that's happening much in Australia?
Good question. I'm not, we're getting some heads. Okay, Andrew, you want? Yeah, okay, here's a response. Andrew Dennis.
Yeah, hi, I'm from Terrain NRM. In the wet tropics here, most of our rivers are quite small and not many of them are dammed, a few are, but there's a lot of things we call fish barriers. So on farms, people put causeways across the streams for access from one paddock to another, or there's little weirs. And those have all been mapped in the wet tropics, and we've been running a program that's just wrapped up, removing or repairing fish barriers, putting in different types of crossings that will allow the fish to continue upstream, and putting in fish ladders where a causeway or something is necessary. So that's been a big program, and it's just got through one of the biggest floods in the wet tropics, and all of the work we did survived the flood. So that was really good.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I was really interested to learn about fish ladders, and there's something called a salmon cannon that actually sucks the salmon up and then like shoots them over the dam. So there's all kinds of contraptions, elevators that take fish up. And sometimes it's like, just take the dam down instead, it's like, instead of all these contraptions. But yeah, because all of these big rivers here, and especially I would say in California, for reservoirs, because, in hydroelectric power, that they're just decimating, especially salmon populations. So, yeah.
All right. Well, it's pretty clear that, all these wildlife corridor transportation schemes that you're talking about have got a lot of promise. They don't all work. They don't all work great, but they work better for certain species than for others. And obviously there's a lot of science to still be going on to studying how species respond and use these things. But overall, as you said, Teddi, it's an incredibly hot and important area of research right now. So thank you very much for sharing all that with us. It's much appreciated.
Thank you for having me. This was such a joy. Thank you very much.
Thanks.